In lesson 2, we're going to focus on enhancing images. For example, we could take the scanned image of this faded picture of Grandma Nasmith. The scan even includes a piece of the scanner. But we're going to take that and we're going to turn it into something like this. Let's get started. First thing we have to do is go to the sample book and select the image we want. Right click, copy the image, and then jump to Gimp and use our Control-Shift-V paste trick. And once again, we're going to say image duplicate, just so we have something to compare before and after. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to convert this image to a grayscale image. We can say image mode grayscale. And now that we have this in grayscale, we can start enhancing this by first cropping the image. So I'm going to say select. So I'm going to choose the crop tool. And I like to use the rule of thirds on things like this. And I like to try to get the eyes close to one of the rule of thirds lines. They're a little low in this case, and they're about centered. So I'm going to select that as my crop. Now what I'd like to do is zoom in here a little bit. Ooh, wow, you see all that ugly stuff. We can fix that by going to a filter that says enhance and noise reduction. And we can adjust the strength of this noise reduction and the previews on so we can kind of see what's happening. I'm just going to step through the different amounts. If I go too far, the whole thing's going to get blurry. And I think that I decided that I liked about an 8 for that. Okay. Back up a little bit. And now that I've reduced the noise, I'm going to adjust the brightness and contrast. So let's experiment with a little more contrast and a little more brightness. And when you're satisfied with that, you can say OK. Now, if I zoom in on this area, you notice that there's this little mark on the chin. I would like to get rid of that. And to do that, I'm going to choose the clone tool. And I have to choose a brush for the clone tool. And so I think I'm going to choose this number 2 hardness brush. Remember, with the clone tool, you capture an area and then you use that area to paint over the other area. So it looks to me like a size of about 30 or maybe 32 will work. So control click and then paint. Maybe down here, control click, paint. Let's try it here. Control Z. I have to do control click first and then paint. And one more. Control click, paint. That improves her chin quite a bit. Maybe just a little bit more in this area here. Control click and then paint. Okay. Now I can zoom back out and I can compare this with the original. Ah, yeah, much better. And there's no end of playing around you can do. For example, you could go and you could get rid of some of this other stuff. There's a streak there that maybe the clone tool could be used. Get rid of that. And there's even more that you can do. But for now, I think we've made a dramatic improvement in Grandma Nasman's portrait. This figure was scanned from an old photograph that was taken outside of this two-room schoolhouse in Scandia, Pennsylvania, where my father attended. He managed to go until 8th grade, and that's all the farther this school went. Let's see how we can improve this photo using Gimp. First, we locate the picture in the sample book, select it, right-click, and say copy the image, and then we'll switch to Gimp. And in Gimp, we'll use our quick key trick, Shift Control V. Just to have a before and after, let's go to Image, duplicate the image. Well, before we do anything else, let's crop this image and see if we can improve on it some. And now we can work on the cropped image. Since this is not a color photo, let's go ahead and say Image, Mode, Grayscale. And even though it's not a color photo, we're going to go to Colors, Auto, Equalize. And that does a pretty good job, but this side is too thin and light, and this part is fairly good. This is a case for using the burn tool. So I select the Dodge burn tool, and sliding down here, I want to select burn, and then I need to go and make sure I have a size that I like. Let's just see. Okay, you see the size there. We can adjust that. Maybe I'll make it just a little bigger. How about 340? Now the trick with the burn tool is every time we click, it burns a little bit. Not too obvious yet, but I'm going to have to do this a lot on this side. So I just keep repeating using the burn tool. And eventually I can get this where it looks a little better. Over here we need a little more. And it's just a matter of playing around with this until you get it just the way you want. If you get it a little too dark, it's always easy to do Control Z and undo the last burn step. Well, as you can see, with just a little bit of effort, we can adjust the brightness level, or we can use what the old photographers would do in the darkroom. We can use the equivalent of burning in parts of this image until we get it looking more uniform and more acceptable. And once we're done, we can save this. So I'm going to save this file, save as, and I have to tell it where to go. And once I have the folder selected where I would like to save this, I'll change untitled to class photo. And if I want to share this with anybody, I need to create either a PNG or JPEG image. So I'll select File, Export As, and I'm using the same folder. This time I'm going to have a PNG version of it. So I'm going to say Export. And when this dialog pops up, I will make sure that I have all these levels set. I'm going to accept the default level for now and say export. Now, when I look at the file folder where I've saved these images, you'll see I have two versions of the class photo. One is the Gimp version, .xcf, and the other is the class photo PNG version. So if you want to share any of these with your friends, if you send them the XCF version, they're going to have Gimp to be able to open it. However, if you send a PNG version, pretty much anyone can open those images. Here's an old photo that's almost impossible to make out in its current condition. This picture was taken in Germany in the early 1900s, where my mother-in-law and her older brothers were playing at fencing. Let's see what we can do with this picture. I'll select it, copy the image, go to Gimp, paste the image using the Control-Shift-V trick, and once again, I'm going to say Image, Duplicate, and I will work on the duplicate of this. I'm going to start by cropping the image. Let's see, it's hard to tell in here how much I really want, but I think maybe about this. Okay, double click. Now the question is, what should I do? Let's try, well, first of all, let's use image mode grayscale, and then let's go to colors, auto, equalize. Well, that got rid of a lot of that mud. Maybe we'll try the old dodge burn tool again. And I want to make sure that I'm using burn rather than dodge in this case. Let's see what we can do here. This picture is pretty hopeless, but it may be possible to get something that's better than we started with. I think I got this a little dark. Let me switch over to dodge. And yeah, I think that's about as good as I can get. Let's try using the filter that is enhance noise reduction. And we can adjust the strength here to see whether we can improve that at all. That's with 0. And I go back here, maybe 16. Let's see how we've done here. This is after working on it, and this is before. So what do you think? Not a pretty picture, but compared with what it started with, it's pretty good. One of the tools we have available that can improve some of the photographs is the saturation tool. You see the before and the after, especially on fall scenes like this. Increasing the saturation can give your pictures a lot more punch. So let's go and find that picture, select it, right click, copy, switch to Gimp, Control Shift V, and as our custom, let's do image, duplicate, and let's work on the duplicate, and then we can compare it to the original. So in this duplicate copy, we'll go to colors, saturation, and we have the preview turned on, and so that we can see what's happening as we change this level. And you can just play with this. Keep going until you're satisfied with the new version. And when you like what's happened, go ahead and say OK. Here's the original, and here's the improved saturation. There's more that we can experiment with here. For example, let's go to colors, shadows and highlights. And here we can adjust shadows and highlights. Let's just increase the value for shadows and see what happens. Oh, okay, bringing out the area here. And on the other side, we can adjust highlights. Too much. Back it off. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to compare this with my original. What do you think? The saturation tool can bring a lot of snap to some fall foliage pictures. In this next exercise, we're going to explore the noise reduction tool in Gimp. And as our practice example, we're going to use this scanned newspaper image. So we'll go to the sample book, select the image, right-click, copy the image, go to Gimp, and use the shortcut keys, Control-Shift-V, and we're also going to go ahead now and make a couple of copies of that image so that we can compare different versions of our experiment. Now, the quality you get from newspaper print images is usually not very good. Let's just zoom in here a little bit. And you can see all of this noise that's in this image. So what we're going to do, I'm going to zoom back out, is we're going to use a filter, enhance, noise reduction. And in that noise reduction dialog box, we're going to increase the strength level. Matter of fact, here's what I should do. Can I zoom in while this dialog box is here? No. Let me cancel that. And let me zoom in on part of this image first. And then let me go to that tool. Filters, enhance, noise reduction. And you see with a level of 4, you see what's going here. What happens if I split the view? This is a good example of splitting the view. You can see now with a strength level of 4, what it looks like compared to the original. Let's just play around with this and see what we get. Level 8, if we go too far, it's going to be very blurry. You see, that's maybe too far. So let's go back to a level that we kind of like. I'm going to go with 16 this time. And then I'll turn off the split view. Then I'm going to say OK. And I've reduced the noise. Now I'm going to zoom out again. And this has improved that area quite a bit. To enhance this image further, I'm going to first do a little cropping. And I don't need all that story there in the newsprint, that news article. And once I've cropped, then I would like to get rid of some of this distracting background. And there are a number of ways to do it. One way is to use the airbrush tool. We'll call up the airbrush tool, and we'll see how big this brush is. That's probably a little too big. So let's back that brush off. Brush size, that's probably a little better. Let's just do 160 for no particular reason, because it seems like a good size to work with. And you see the brush style we're using, and we have the foreground color set to default color of black. So let's just try airbrushing some of this distracting background out. Now this will take a little bit of time, because that airbrush doesn't happen instantly. So if you're patient, you can go in here and you can just remove all of this distracting background area. I'll come back once I've done a little bit of that. After spending a little bit of time, I used a black airbrush to go and essentially paint out some of the distracting background. And now you can see the difference between before, or this is what we started with, and this is after removing some of the noise and then painting out the background. There are other ways to deal with this that you'll see when we work on another portrait in another lesson here in a little while. In this next exercise, we're going to take this old family portrait. It was taken in Sundsvall, Sweden in the early 1900s. And here we have my grandfather, Nasman, my aunt, Selma, and my great-grandfather, Anders. What I would like to do is I would like to start with this and extract a portrait just of Grandpa Nasman. Let's see how that works. In the sample image book, I'll find the old family portrait, select it, copy it, go back into Gimp, and paste the image. Ah, here's something we haven't seen before. We have to rotate this image. And there's a trick we can use in Gimp to do that. Gimp has a rotate tool. However, we're not going to use that. Instead, we're going to go to Image, Transform, Rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise, and just like that, we've rotated that image. We could have used the rotate tool, but if we choose the rotate tool, we'll have to get into this dialog box and set the angle and center and all of that. In this case, it's much simpler just to use the image, transform, rotate counterclockwise. Notice you can rotate quickly 90 clockwise, counterclockwise, or 180 degrees, or an arbitrary angle. You can also flip horizontally or vertically using this image transform tool. Now what I would like to do is I'd like to get just Grandpa Nasman out of this picture. And to do that, I'm going to use this free select tool. And with the free select tool, I think I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and slide up here a little bit. The free select tool, I have to basically trace around the image I want to keep. So I click, and I keep clicking, and I keep doing this. The closer together I click these points, the closer I'll follow the image. If I have a long area, I can click farther apart for those areas. Well, I'm going to have to go all the way around this. It's going to take a minute or so. So I'll be right back. But just hold on while I hide away and do this in secret. And if I hold the shift key down, I can cause the next selection point to be on a horizontal line. And the more curvature there is, oops, what happened? I don't want to clip those fingers out, and I don't want to have a big lump in Grandpa's shoulder there. So I'm just going to click right on top of those fingers. Once again, the more curvature there is in my selection, the closer together I should choose the selection points. And when I get very close to the end, I want to close this out. So I'm just going to hit the Enter key. And there I've closed the selection. Now that I have selected just Grandpa Nasman, I'm going to copy this selection and create a new image with it. So I'm going to use Control C, copy the image, and then I'm going to do Control Shift V. And now I have a new image that I've pasted from the original image and from the selected part of the original image. Well, so far so good, but I think I'd like to crop this and balance it out a little bit. So go back to the crop tool. This time I think I'll use the rule of thirds just so that I can kind of balance this picture. I like to have, not have much of a choice here, but usually I like to have the rule of thirds line across the eyes. And I can crop some of this out. And now I have a little bit better balance, so I'll go ahead and finish the crop. And now in this new crop, I still have some fingers there. Well, you know what I'm going to do with that? I'm just going to paint that out, or I could use the clone tool. Either way works. Let's adjust the view here a little bit. And I'm going to go to the clone tool. And whoops, way too big. I have to run that clone tool down to a reasonable size. 30 is a bit much still. Maybe, I don't know, 20. How's that look? Okay, so Control, click to copy, and select, Control, click, paint, 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 paint. And now I've taken care of those annoying fingers. Let's zoom back out. And now I've got a lot of noise here. Let's see if I can use the noise reduction tool to fix that. So go to Filters, Enhance, Noise Reduction. And do you want to split the screen and check that out again? Okay, there's the noisy version. There's the reduced version. What happens if I get up to about 8? Yeah, I kind of like that. Okay, now that I've reduced the noise, I still have some little glitches from the original dirty photo on Grandpa's face there. Let's go back to the clone tool and reduce the size quite a bit. And maybe not quite that much. And Control, click, paste, paste, paint, paint, zoom back out. And there I have a portrait of Grandpa Nasmyth. And that was extracted from this original dirty photograph or busy photograph. So I've gotten rid of Great Grandpa and Aunt Selma for the purposes of my Grandpa Nasmyth portrait. If you're a really good student, you'll remember from earlier lessons how to make a frame. So let's frame Grandpa Nasmyth. But before we do that, let's make a couple of copies to work from. And that will leave our, not the original, but our modified original to compare. What I should do is I should get rid of this box and just have this cropped image as my selection. And to do that, layer to image size. And now you can see that my image is only that part inside that crop area. Now when I try to make a frame, filters, decor, let's just add a border this time. And let's try it. Okay, that border is way too big for this picture. So I'm going to do Control Z, add back out of it, and I'm going to go and try again. And when we added a border that was 36, it was way too big. Probably need to cut that about half. Let's try 16, see how that looks. Yeah, I think that's a little better. Well, since we have copies here, we can experiment. We can take another one of the copies. Let's do this layers to image size again. And this time, let's do filters, decor, fuzzy border. I think that might be too big again. Let's see. Yep, way too big. Control Z. Wait a minute. The fuzzy border, remember, created a brand new image, so we don't have to Control Z. We can just get rid of that image. Let's go back to the image we want to work on and say image, oops, say filters, decor, fuzzy border, not so big. I wish there was a preview on some of these things. Yeah, I don't like the fuzzy border because the edges here are cropped too close to the image itself. Let's dump that one. Let's try one more try here. Filters, decor, round corners, and the edge radius. If I look at this, this image is only 239 by 312. So if I use half of that or a third of that, I won't get very good results. I can reduce this down to maybe 16 and the shadow offset. Just for fun, let me try 16 on both of those. And 16 all the way around. And this time it'll be working on a copy. Give it a try. And I think that shadow is probably just a little too much. So let's kill that one. And let's go back and try again. Filters, decor, round corners, and the drop shadow we want to be a lot less. So let's drop that drop shadow down to about an 8, half as much as it was. And then say OK. And that's kind of interesting. The rounded corner, notice, didn't round this corner. It rounded the corner of the actual image. And it put the drop shadow against the actual image, not against the selection there at all. So now we have another version of the portrait of Grandpa Nasman. Let's do one more. Layers, layers to image size. Just for fun, let me try this fuzzy select tool and click right there. Oh, notice what it did. It selected just that part, but it didn't select all the way around here. So I'm going to hold the shift key down and select that size. Now with that selected, I could do all kinds of things. For example, I could use my fill tool and fill with the foreground color, but make the foreground color be something different. And click. How's that? A little too stark for this picture. Undo that. And this time, instead of the foreground fill, let's do a pattern fill. We've got to find the pattern we want to use. And we can find the pattern here, or we can find the pattern up here. So we're going to try. This is, again, going to be trial and error a little bit. Pink marble, I don't think so. Crinkled paper, maybe. There we go. Again, you can spend a lot of time working with all the various permutations and combinations when you're enhancing your images. If you're following along in the book version, you'll notice that the exercise of creating a grandpa portrait is followed by a very similar exercise to create a portrait of Aunt Selma. But let's move ahead a little bit and let's work on this portrait of Lucille. So I'm going to select and copy it, and I'm going to paste it into Gimp. Now we're going to use a little different approach now to make a portrait of Lucille. So we're going to go ahead and crop Lucille a little bit here. And I have my rule of thirds tool. And I'll just drag this out around here a little bit. And once again, I want to try to keep Lucille's eyes close to the rule of thirds intersections. Can't quite do it in this portrait or in this photo, but I can get fairly close. And then I'll say crop. Once again, I'm going to use layer to image size, and then I'm going to copy this image a couple of times so I have some variations to work on. Now, if you examine up here in the title bar, you'll notice that the size of this image after cropping is only 544 by 740 pixels. And that's not a very high resolution. And would like to scale this up a little bit. And that requires a couple of steps. Maybe we'd like to just have this in a 4x5 format before we're done. So let's go to File, New, only this time we're not going to make it the same size as this one. We're going to switch from pixels to inches, and we're going to make this 4 inches by 5 inches, which is a common portrait size. Okay, and that'll come out 1200 by 1500. It'll increase the resolution here. Okay, so there's our new image. And that image is 1200 by 1500 as opposed to this one, which is only 500. So now I'm going to copy this cropped image, Control C, go to my 4x5 image, and actually just Control V, paste this image in there. Now what I'm going to do is a scale trick. Over here is a scale tool, and now I can drag the corners of this until they're right there in that 4x5 size. Can move it. Oops. Need to move it over here a little bit. And the proportions of my cropped image are not exactly 4x5. However, I can get close here. When I've got that the size I want, I'll say scale. And now notice that this earlier version was only 544 by 740. The new version is 1200 by 1500. So I've scaled the image upwards, and it gives me a lot more resolution to use when I use the next tool, which is going to be the scissors tool. Now with the scissors tool, I'm going to select a lot of points around the outside of the Lucille portrait. And I'm losing a little bit of her hair that's sticking up there. Should have combed that before we took the picture, shouldn't we? Except that it was a candid picture, and there was no posing for this. It was just a snapshot while we were sitting around the table one evening. And again, the more curve we have, the closer we need to get. And now I'm going to go all the way over here to the edge. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, go straight across to this side, and then start tracing around here. I'm going to select the Move tool to remove the display of all those scissors points, and you can see the outline of the selection. And this time, I don't want to have what's inside the selection area, but I want to have the outside. So let me say select, invert. Now I have the outside instead of the inside. And now with that selection, I can go ahead and remove all of this stuff in one quick stroke. If I press the delete key, all this stuff out here will go away, but it will be changed to the current background color. By the way, I don't want that blue anymore. So let's see what happens when I hit the delete key. And there it goes. Now I can do all kinds of things with that. One thing I can do is I can copy this version of the image so that I can play with this a little bit, because now I can use the fill tool, the bucket fill tool, and mess around with different patterns. I think I'll put a little stone wall behind her. Wonder what that would look like. It would look like that. Okay, and let's keep going here. Let's make another copy just for fun. Image, duplicate, and then on this version, instead of using the pattern fill, I'm going to do a gradient fill. And here it is. Here's a gradient fill. And this can go foreground to background. And so let me set the foreground to very light blue. And let's see what happens here. Gradient fill. See what's happening is the first place I picked up the background color, and then it dragged out to the foreground color. Let's back up and let's do this again. Only this time it looks like I'm putting that on her nose, but I want to have the white kind of behind her like this. Okay. And now I can go back to the Move tool to remove that. And now you see several variations of using the scissors tool to enhance the portrait of Lucille. Oh, after all this work, I noticed when I did this scissors thing, I somehow got this little thing in the way. Well, you know what we can do about that, don't you? We could just do our old friend, the clone tool, and make it a little bigger. Try to get the right size here. And then I'm going to go Control click, and then I'm going to paint right over that. Oops. Control click. Control click. And if that was supposed to be white there, no problem. I'll just Control click there and I'll paint over that. So we have lots of ways to doctor these pictures when we want to enhance our images.